Now, Natanael, tell us, what is the process for deciding whether the government has acted lawfully or not?
Good evening, Yvonne. So the Constitutional Council, the Conseil Constitutionnel, will decide about this law, about this bill. And it's important to remind that this is the highest authority in France that decide about everything related to laws regarding constitutional matters. And importantly enough, you have 9 members that have been appointed by both the French president, the president of the National Assembly, and the president of the Senate. But you have 3 members renewed every 3 years. So it means that not all the members of the authority support Emmanuel Macron. So it's very difficult to know what they think. They have to be neutral and just look at the law without any political consideration.
Okay, that's going to be difficult, isn't it? When are we expecting to have a verdict, and what are you expecting to hear from it? So
we expect to have a verdict end of afternoon in France, so in the middle of the night in Australia. So it's very hard to talk about the verdict, but what the real question is, will the whole bill be voided? That's really the principal question. It happened in the past, but it was very rare. So it's most likely that, in fact, part of the bill will be cancelled by the Constitutional Council and other parts will be voted. And what is very likely to happen is that the increase of the legal pension age from 62 to 64 will be accepted, but some of the parts of the reform, such as the part concerning, the worker of old people and such reforms to facilitate, old workers to keep on working and keep on being, essential, for example, may be voided. So this is really what is likely to happen. Part will be accepted, part will be cancelled.
Yes, so many people will be listening to see what happens here. And for Emmanuel Macron, there is so much at stake. What is the worst case scenario for the president?
So the worst case scenario is that the whole bill be voided. And there could be one reason, even if it's very rare that it's voided, is that Emmanuel Macron, when he made his bill voted, he in fact used a legislative process that is usually used for a budget bill that happens at the end of every year. And why he used this specific bill regarding the social security budget? It's because it's a fast track. Because at the end of every year in France, we have to vote the social security budget. It's one of the only bills in France that is aligned with the calendar year. And Emmanuel Macron wanted to align this pension reform bill to the social security budget bill because he wanted to fast track the pension reform bill. But obviously, he can't do it. So that's one of the reasons. If the Council is a bit conservative, it will say, we won't consider each single aspect of the bill, but we'll just use this aspect, the fact that you misuse the bill and the vehicle to vote the bill, to cancel the whole bill. And that's the worst case scenario that could happen with Emmanuel Macron.
Okay, if the verdict is that the government has acted lawfully, presumably Mr. Macron will just push ahead with the reforms, or is there room for negotiation?
There's always room for negotiation in both cases. Even if if nothing is voided and if the whole bill is accepted, there's still room for negotiation. For example, there's something else that is called the référendum d'initiative partagée, which is a kind of a referendum. It has been created in 2015, but it has never been used in the past. It's about what? It's about, in fact, 10% of the people in age to vote, so which is about in France 4.8 million people, plus a certain percentage of the parliament. We don't need the majority, but if we have 10% of the citizens in age to vote plus a certain percentage, there could be a referendum with a simple question, do you want the bill or no to be voted? So that's one of the options. The other option is that Emmanuel Macron could in fact contest the decision and just reshape a little bit the bill and in fact redo the process a little bit without using the social security budget bill as a vehicle, and could go in 1 month, for example, with exactly the same text and try to make this bill accepted by first the National Assembly.
Okay. So what happens today is really key to what happens in the coming weeks. Do you think mass protests will continue, or are they starting to subside a little bit, whichever way this verdict goes?
So unions already say that they don't want to protest for 6 months because it's not in their interest neither. So probably what everyone wants is an acceptable solution for both camps. And I think, in fact, that if the Constitutional Council voids part of the bill but accept another part of the bill or some reforms within this bill, that could be something that both parties, the government and the unions, accept. But there's also a political issue behind that, is in fact that it's not just the president and the government against the people. You have also a political game happening at the assembly. And for example, we know that Elizabeth Borne also referred to the Constitutional Council because she wanted to accelerate the acceptation of the bill. But the extreme left referred to the Constitutional Council and the extreme right too. So you have different players who have different objectives regarding this bill that also need after to agree if another bill, for example, is presented in front of the National Assembly.
It's very complex, but at the heart of it, what is the issue here? Why has Mr. Macron been so insistent that these reforms need to take place, and why has there been so much opposition against it?
So, in fact, there's always opposition when it comes to pension reform, and we discussed that in one of the previous shows. I think Emmanuel Macron also, it's his last mandate, because in France the maximum number of mandates is 2, and every single French president, every single maybe political man or woman wants to give a legacy to its country. And we know that on the international scene, Emmanuel Macron already gave a lot of legacy at the international, but above all at the EU level. But on the domestic scene, it's true that at the moment, there's not a lot of things that could be flagged as Emmanuel Macron successes. And I think it's also a bit of an attitude, because most of his predecessors failed into voting this pension reform bill. Nicolas Sarkozy, but also François Hollande. We talked about the use of the 49.3 to go against the parliament. So I think Emmanuel Macron wanted really to give this legacy and use the pension reform as a flagship for him.
Right, so he's really wanting to make a mark before he eventually leaves office. Well, Natanael, thank you so much for coming in and explaining that to us. It's really interesting, and we look forward to seeing what the outcome is today.
Yeah, a few hours.